My name is Dr. Mishori. I'm a senior lecturer at the Department of Environmental Studies at the School of the Environment and Earth Sciences of the Faculty of Exact Sciences at Tel Aviv University, which makes me the first philosopher ever to be in the Department of Exact Sciences. And although the university provides me with enough funds to go to international conferences, the last time I've been at an international conference was 1914, and it was on bioethics. And this was the first event that I allowed myself to participate in. In 5 years. And I came here to Thailand because of 2 events that I'm deeply involved at the moment, which I will speak about. One is the struggle against water fluoridation in Israel, and the other is medical cannabis. And I will explain how these two are interconnected. I will talk, the title of my talk is The Role of Experts, Bioethical Implications of Disciplinary Science. I hold no bad thoughts about experts. I consider myself experts in various fields, but I think that disciplinary science is dangerous and gave excessive power to experts through professional ethics, and I will explain. I had long experience in environmental and social activism. I was chairperson of the coordinating forum of junior academic faculty organizations in Israel. I chaired the organization for various years, and after there I was the strategic advisor and later the head of the negotiation team for 18 years in total. And I was also chair of the Israeli Bicycle Association, which is an environmental group focusing on bike advocacy and alternative transportation. I also wrote a book titled Fairness, Meditations on First Philosophy and Environmental Ethics, in which I stated my views according to which the human body and mind was misinterpreted. I think that what my belief is that the human body is perfect, as it is. As it was created by God and evolution. Strong believer in true science, and science in the sense of the tree of knowledge as perceived by the Jewish tradition, as a tree of knowledge, right from wrong. So ethics is the primary principle of knowledge and of science, and if we go the wrong way in ethics, we will not have a valid science. That's my strong belief. I live according to my belief system, which is strong belief in God, in the Hebrew way. I follow no tradition whatsoever. I believe in Hebrew. I practice yoga all my life and martial arts, Tai Chi and Kung Fu. I think that yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong and various other traditions hold valid principles and valid conceptions, and I will demonstrate in the beginning of my talk so you will understand my position. But first I want to express my emotions. I suffered during the past 3 days a terrible environmental shock, because I'm not only under severe jet lag and after not sleeping properly for more than a month due to the work that was imposed on me, and I will explain about it, but I was forced to breathe the air of Bangkok. Now, I've been in Bangkok many times in my life, and first times were in 94 and 98. And in 98, I was forced to make some arrangements, and I was waiting for a bus. And I started running because I was suffocated by the terrible air pollution. And I ran until I could find a taxi and ran back to my guest house. And swore never to come back to Bangkok, but having met Soming in 2008, I visited in the past 10 years Thailand regularly, at least once a year, usually more. And I had the impression that the air was somehow better. And this impression was caused by the very fact that I used to be driven by Soming with a car with air condition. So I didn't have to experience again waiting for public transport in the open. But in the past 3 days, since Soming was also overworked, I had to wear the mask and wait for the public transport and then run through the city for few kilometers, including the hospital. That's why I couldn't join you the tour yesterday. And I suffered a great shock, which I will demonstrate by my normal activities, which is Qigong. So I will demonstrate Tai Chi. This was first part of my variation of the Tai Chi Yang style. And it's focused around the body as circular. So modern anatomy is right only in the details, but not in the conception, because the human body is centered around the stomach according to meridians. You can see that I'm walking around my center. Chakras are valid, meridians are valid. The description of Qigong and Tai Chi and Yoga are valid. And according to my best judgment, medicine and science, which cannot comprehend my self-research, is incomplete. Not invalid, but incomplete. And their inability to integrate other systems of thoughts and other conceptions is preposterous and dangerous. Now, you must have seen that I was working through the whole time, but I was not working on my thing. I was deeply moved by every word that was made here, because I was trying to integrate my thoughts into something which is already 44,000 words long and keep writing itself and prevents me from sleeping or even doing my exercises, and from eating. The only thing I ate since the morning is banana shake at 5 o'clock because of an imminent danger that I felt to myself and my family. Now, few personal remarks before I begin. Because silence that. Just do the mute to the computer. I was born in Israel. My father's family came from Russia. From family, I never knew my grandfather, but he died a year before I was born. But I was told that until his very last days, he was waking up screaming from horrors, from the pogroms that he suffered as a Jew with his family in Russia. My mother was born in Mönchengladbach, 28 years after Hans Jonas was born in the same city, Mönchengladbach. And I will not mention his name anymore, but whatever I say should be considered as a continuation of his thought. I consider him the best philosopher of the modern era. And I would like to have the opportunity to deepen into his thought more and more. My mother's family, as I said, came from Germany. My mother's childhood memory is seeing the synagogue burning when she was 7 years old. My grandfather, from my mother's side, miraculously managed to escape his family from Germany to Israel, where she lives in a healthy way to this present day. She's an eye doctor. So whatever I say is not anything against the medical profession, because I have my mother's side. I should also state that I hold no bad thoughts against the Germans. I've lived in Germany for many months after I was released from the army, and I met good people and I met less good people, but I believe in the good of humanity, and I believe that present Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, is a visionary politician, and the very fact that she incorporated million Syrian refugees from the terrible civil war is the proof that there is nothing inherently bad in people, in this respect in German people, but we should be beware from dangerous hierarchy. Now I'll go to my story. My convictions are ecocentric. I believe in that true morality should incorporate everything. If we start making restrictions, this is the dangerous path. So we can not exclude any single living being, certainly not other living beings, because if we start doing that, we will end in a Nazi science, which is valid science but incomplete and therefore dangerous. I want just to remark that the German science proved already in the 30s that tobacco was dangerous, and it took the rest of the world 50 years to understand. And because corporate science and deceit was involved. Deep ecology is my conviction, because deep ecology is, first of all, is ecocentric, and secondly, it involves asking deep questions. And I keep asking deep questions. For example, I told that I'm a faithful believer in God, but none of the rabbis that I know sit in perfect meditation as the Buddha. So I think that he is a better example in this respect for a true believer, because I believe that human beings should not sit on chairs. Now, those chairs are designed by experts, good, willing experts, but humans should be on the ground, as God created us, and evolution. I see no distinction. So, I think that well-meaning people, by becoming experts, may become experts in some mistakes. And this is when things become dangerous. Whatever I say is in the sense of Van Rensselaer Potter. The broad sense of bioethics I will explain a little later. So the part one is water fluoridation. I will go fast through some of the slides, because you will see pros and cons of the slides, because water fluoridation is described on one hand as a scientific way to secure oral health, especially for young children, and we want to take care of our youngs, especially since modern world based on wrong foods or non-foods is prone to cavities, or we are talking about a dangerous, poisonous substance. One more personal remark before I continue. I have two daughters. Their mother is from India. They live together in one family with the grandparents. Both are not healthy. The grandmother has a kidney problem, which means that she may suffer severe consequences from added risk of fluoridation water. That's what I meant by sensing deep threat to my family, because the welfare of my daughters is dependent on the health of their Jewish Indian grandparents. Before I continue, a methodological remark. We're talking about 70 years of controversy about water fluoridation. This is amazing. 70 years about a single issue. We will understand what this issue in few sentences, because the topic, as I said, is enormous. But an important distinction should be made following my doctor father, supervisor, one of the two supervisors of my thesis, Marcelo Descal, who distinguished between three kinds of polemics: discussion, dispute, and controversy. In discussion, we want to arrive at the truth, but we think that we know the rules of the game. In dispute, truth doesn't matter. We want to win. In the eyes of a third party, for example, to pass a legislation, whatever needed in order to pass this legislation, or if you want to win a court case, whatever needed to win in this court case, even if it means to lie to the Supreme Court of Justice. In controversy, we look for the truth, but once we start our discourse, our polemics, we realize that we have to question methodologies and conceptions, and we're not sure who are the experts and whose opinions to rely on, and how to integrate all the different related facts. By the way, you notice I refrain from holding the mic because this is the power of the chi. The deepest I have in my hand, the more I can breathe, and the bigger I expand, so I never make myself smaller the size of the neck. So I always leave my hands free. So the question is, how come a dangerous substance like fluoride was added into our water, and something which gave me the impression of most of my adult life that it was something good for my health and even tastes like mint through dental paste. This is the pro-fluoride story. We had an epidemic of cavities, which actually existed, and we managed to control it by means of fluoride through water fluoridation in our system and through our dentistry assisted by the manufacturers of toothpaste with fluoride. So it's all interconnected. Consumerism, professional medicine and science, and water fluoridation. And it is being marketed as a community thing, family thing. Now, fluoride is one of the most toxic substances on earth. It is toxic to every cell in the human body. It is toxic even to the bacteria which live in our mouth. Therefore, if we scientifically test the effect of fluoride, we can show that it reduces the amount of bacteria in our mouth. But I can assure you that if you eat only once or twice a day, it will reduce the amount of bacteria in your mouth even better. And will preserve balance, harmonious balance in your integral ecosystem between you and all the other organisms which live within us in our body, including our mouth. So this is the story. There are some lunatics arguing against fluoride in the water, but the weight of scientific evidence, thousands of papers, dozens of thousands of papers, show that these lunatics don't understand anything about science. They are portrayed as hysteric and as disseminating hysteria in the public. This is what fluoride does when it goes into the body. It defects our bones, and this has been shown by places in which natural fluoride affects human health, like in places like in India or China, in which the fragile people whose bones tend to fracture and they lose their spinal, horrible things. But this is how people like me are being portrayed. You're not going to poison my water with fluoride, and he has no teeth in his mouth. I would just want to say I'm almost 53 years old, and Sumin could testify, I haven't been sick since 2009. And this is the alternative. Fluoride is safe, whatever evidence may be suggested. Now, one of the 10 most important public health measures in the 20th century. It was said by the American CDC, the Center for Disease Control. Now, how did they come out with this statement? Well, the CDC's Department of Communal Density, and that's what they do best, fluoride water, and they had to submit a report for the end of the millennium. So the head of the department asked one of the junior people, a dentist, please write something. Well, what did our department did? How many departments there are in the CDC? One of the 10 most important public health measures in the 20th century, and it has been quoted ever since for almost 20 years. And in Yiddish, it is said, "Nu, Hogel gesucht." So he said. What does it mean? That we should learn Yiddish also. I will not quote a single word from two books that I recommend about. The Fluoride Deception by Christopher Bryson, and The Case Against Fluoride, How Hazardous Waste Ended Up in Our Drinking Water, and the Bad Science and Powerful Politics That Keeps It There, by Professor of Chemistry Paul Cornett, whom I had the privilege of hearing in 2007 when he attended a meeting at the Knesset, and the way he was treated by the expert of density, I explain here, I cannot expand here. Because here I only quote my adversaries. I try to understand how they think. So, basic timeline. Beginning of the 20th century, people started noticing what they then called mottled enamel, stains in the teeth which could lead to even breaks and all kinds of deformations. Later to be discovered that they are caused by fluorosis, which is exposure to the dangerous substance of fluoride. But then, in the 40s, within a framework which I will not talk about, but you can read about in the books I recommended, a hypothesis emerged, according to which fluoride in the right dosage ceases to be a dangerous substance and becomes a drug, a cure for dental cavities, and therefore a key element in medicine and in oral health. And it has been practiced since 1949 in the USA and spreads to various other countries. Currently, 30 countries fluoride partially their water. The only country which has mandatory fluoridation laws is Ireland, and Israel was supposed to be the second. Israel was the second. I will expand about it later. Next slide. So we have 70 years of water fluoridation and water fluoridation science. Now the argument pro-fluoridation, it is good against dental cavities, especially for young children, 7 to 12. Remember that number, it is important. Fluoridation skepticism is deposited in a dangerous substance, further incorporate illogical science. Okay. Presently, 400 million people enjoy fluoridated water. Now, the case of Israel. It began in 1980 through the Ministry of Health, through internal committees, no public involvement. I first heard about this from my mother, who is an eye doctor and believes whatever the doctor says, and I knew that even if I don't brush my teeth properly, fluoridated water will take care of my cavities. And luckily I was most of my life free of cavities. I thought something had to do with fluoridated water. 30 years ago, a law similar to that of Ireland was passed through the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, against public misgivings, which were portrayed as people who don't understand science. And you've seen the picture of the person above, you understand. First appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice was made in 2002 and was revoked. Why? Because the Supreme Court of Justice, in Israel, as of 1979, holds a policy that if experts are in dispute, he always takes the side of the government. So it means that the experts of the government know that they have nearly 100% assurance that whatever they say in court will not hold a bet against them. They don't have to have a valid science. They could tell lies in court and to the Israeli parliament and will get away with it. I was told about this case in 2004 by the scientific advisor to the NGO who presented this appeal. And he made me realize that there was something in the argument, but I didn't go, I couldn't go inside all the science, so I just realized there was some logic in the argument of the fluoridation skeptics, and since we have fluoride anyhow in our toothpaste, what do they need fluoridation water for? It took me only a few years ago to realize that water fluoridation is part of the structure which justifies the fluoridated toothpaste. It's one of integrated science which I will explain in a few sentences. I will just refer to two studies made in Israel in 1995 and 2012. I will refer to them later. In 2014, the Minister of Health, Ministress of Health, Yael German, ended water fluoridation based on the conclusions of a professional committee which surveyed the whole field of water management submitted its finding in 2007, and the Ministry of Health refused to implement the recommendation until 2014 for 7 years, because they recommended also not to have mandatory water fluoridation. So she accepted the conclusions of that committee. And by the way, she was also involved as a mayor of a city in Israel in order to appeal against water fluoridation, and couldn't do it. Then she became the Minister of Health. Then she accepted the recommendation. So since 2014, we have no fluoridation of water in Israel. And fluoridation skeptics were very happy, and they made a celebration, and I was invited, and I got like a paper saying that thank you for my effort, although I contributed only like 2 or 3 papers of insignificance. And then, immediately after she ended her term, the professional team with the new Minister of Health, who was the old Minister of Health, decided to revoke her decision, and at the 16th of March 1916 held a meeting of the committee at the Knesset, in which I participated, and at that point I said that I used the term intellectual dishonesty in what the professionals are saying to the parliament, because they deny the controversy. I mean, you could say that there is an argument, and we are, this side is wrong and we are right. But they denied the controversy. They said that all the experts agreed that it was a safe and indisputable scientific procedure. And in the crowd, there was myself, and there was a professor from Ben Gurion University who is an expert in water, and there was the former engineer of the Ministry of Health who was in charge of water fluoridation, and he was arguing against it. And whatever we said, they still said, all the experts. So I began to understand that something is wrong with the way that science is built, because when they say all the experts, they mean all the relevant expert, which is actually only the dentist. I will come to that later. Actually, one specific dentist. The former Minister of Health immediately appealed to the Supreme Court of Justice, and the decision of the Israeli Parliament to resume water fluoridation was suspended until a decision made in October, early November, saying that, well, the technical problem that the Supreme Court of Justice in Israel found was immaterial, and the Ministry of Health can proceed with its plans. And then a few avid fluoride skeptics joined in and managed to secure a meeting with the Ministry of Health, with the professional team. There was the head of public health services and head of dentistry services. And I was part of the fluoride skeptics. And the meeting was held on 20 November 2018, and on 18 December we sent a letter, 34 pages with 66 questions to the Ministry of Health, with 3 pages of recipients, including all the leading professors of environmental relevance or any kind of relevance in science. And the Ministry of Health made a mistake, and they sent on the 26th of December a letter to a professor of Bible in Bar-Ilan University, in which they stated in 2 pages their belief about the validity of fluoride science. And I've been writing their response ever since, with hardly no sleep, and once that response is submitted within the next 2 weeks, there will be no water fluoridation in Israel, I promise you. But the bioethical implications are material, and that's what we're going to discuss now. Because the science of water fluoridation, according to what was said in the parliament, was that there is no controversy. Now, the head of the parliamentary committee said several times that in other areas of dispute, a political dispute, he can employ basic logic. But not in this case. This is only a matter of data, and only the experts understand about it. So I'm going to explain fluoridation science in few sentences to all the audience here. And because it's all focused on one single argument, that there is an optimal recommended dosage, yet it is sola dosis facit venenum, which is a sentence said by 16th century toxicologists who died at an early age by poisoning himself, and ever since is considered the father of modern toxicology. Now, it's all, you remember science, it's all focused in Israel on a single person who is a professor of community dentistry at the Hebrew University, who is an avid promoter of fluoridation, whose research was funded also by Colgate-Palmolive, who submitted an appeal to the Supreme Court of Justice in 2015 against the former Ministress of Health after she cancelled water fluoridation, who regard dental fluorosis as cosmetic problem only, who was head of the so-called Independent Committee on Water Fluoridation for the Ministry of Health, which instead of making a long-term 10-year study of the topic, made instead research on 5 schools in a single year on 12 years old, 3 schools in fluoridated areas, 2 in non-fluoridated cities. I will come back on that later, but the researcher in that research what his colleague from the same department. So this one person is the guy who convinced the whole professional rank of the Ministry of Health, including all the professional bodies, which is the Union of the Doctors of Public Health Services and a Union of Pediatrics. I will return to this later. By the way, how much time do I have?
I think until the end of the universe.
Yes, okay. So I will, thank you. So I will just proceed.
Yeah.
I will just quote one paper from Reviewing Environmental, one passage only. There are a number of adverse effects that chronic digestion of fluoride at high dosage can have on human health, including dental fluorosis, skeletal fluorosis, increased rates of bone fractures, decreased birth rates, increased rates of urolithiasis, kidney stones, impaired thyroid function, and lower intelligence in children, chronic occupational exposure to fluoride dust and gas associated with higher rates of bladder cancer and variety of respiratory ailments. It has been known as systemic toxin. The effects of fluoride on teeth is supposedly topical and not systemic, so drinking fluoridated water has no benefits. Fluoride is a lipid-soluble, neurotoxin and enzyme poison, accumulates in the pineal gland and bones. Dental fluorosis is a marker for skeletal fluorosis. I will return to this later. The single argument I want to say is that the 16th century argument that the only difference between poison and a cure is a dosage is preposterously invalid after more than 50 years of environmental science, in which we know that toxins build up in systems, whether it is ecological systems or organisms, and density and the whole world of medicine still focus on the 16th century paradigm. This is an egg. Fluoride was water with confidence, use high purity alcohol sodium fluoride. Now you remember I only quote my adversaries. I never quote my fluoride skeptics. This is the head of density in the density division in the Ministry of Health in Israel. How they managed to come up with the fluoride hypothesis. Their assumption was that mottling was caused by something in the water, but it was not clear in 1931. A certain scientist, Churchill, a chemist working for an aluminum manufacturer, Alcoa, was concerned that people might think that the color was caused by the aluminum. He analyzed the water from areas where blah blah reported the staining, looking at several elements, and found high level of fluoride, and the name of the occurrence was changed again to dental fluorosis. So first, they identified the ailment, dental fluorosis, and then they came up with a dangerous hypothesis that since that was logically based on 16th century science, since the only difference between dosage and the cure is poison and cure is dosage, there must be some miraculous number that will represent this cure, backed by corporate science. The background, as I said, is in the two books I recommended. I will not talk about it myself. Now, how is the fluoride work? Now you're going to know the science. The theory was that it works in two ways: systemic through the body and topical. Now, systemic fluoridation was disproved long ago. Now we have only the adverse effect as I described before. How it should work? Now the dentist explained. The original stuff with which we are made, it's called hydroxyapatite, which was created by billions of years of evolution or creation with God. It's same for me as a believer. I see no contradiction. They came up with something better, because you see the product of evolution couldn't cope with modern corporate non-foods of modern consumerism, which cause cavities. So they came up with a substance which is poisonous to the bacteria in our mouths. In what way? In the production of energy. Now, every cell in our body produces energy with the same mechanism. It's the mitochondria. This is a living organism incorporated into our cells long ago through endosymbiotic principle, and it has been the producer of energy in every cell in our body. So fluoride disrupts this mechanism in the bacteria, and there is no theory which even states that it doesn't do the same with every other living organism, including humans. Secondly, it displaces the original molecular structure of our teeth from hydroxyapatite to something much better, fluoroapatite, which is stronger against the bacteria. But you see, stronger is less flexible. You see, that's the power of Kung Fu, as I demonstrated, against aggression. That's why Kung Fu martial artists never attack anyone. He's just in peace. He doesn't need to attack. He just remains inflexible in mind and body. So they said you should strengthen your teeth with something better, fluoroapatite. But since it is stronger, it is less flexible and prone to fractures. And then we have cavities. That's why in fluoridation science, this is the basic effect in children aged 7 to 12. And then the effect drops. And they say, but we have to fluoride our water because children are the most most important. I mean, who should we, that the future generations, right? We should care about our children. Forget about the environment, forget about the fact that we are talking about, well, in Israeli terms, 7,000 tons yearly of neurotoxins dumped into the water system, and then, since Israel is number one in water renewal, most of the water in the domestic sectors then is being put into our agriculture, into the fields. And since Israel is the first and number one, with no competitor in this field, there is no outside science that can disprove potential environmental, ecological effects. So you could not depend on any global science or American science, because they don't do it. So that means, now, these 7,000 tons of neurotoxins means like 700 trailers moving in the roads in Israel, prone to accidents. If one accident, such accidents occur, this is a potential catastrophe of like, you can erase the university on that. Yeah, I'm talking about the university because Bar-Ilan University is just next to one of the central road in Israel, and so is Tel Aviv University. Added to air pollution by such 700 trucks a year after year, added, I mean, just calculate the enormous risk being taken, and they said that they calculate the cost-benefit analysis, and the calculation is that they save by dental procedures $40 for every dollar they put in water fluoridation, which means this is how disciplinary science becomes dangerous. Now it is based on contradiction, this science, because they say it is based on the optimum or recommended dosage, but they cannot control the dosage because they see the dosage only in the pipe. They don't see fluoride in the human body. They don't even have a theory about what's the best dosage in a human body, in a children's body. They have no theory. The whole so-called science, this corporate pseudoscience, is based on epidemiological data that argue that from this, when you look from outer space at the data, you see a reduction in cavities in children, because of course it is the first sign of dental fluorosis. Even the bacteria are starting to die out in our so it's based on the contradiction that it's all about the recommended optimal dosage, and they cannot control the dosage because they don't know how much I drink. I hardly drink at all. I don't need much drink as I don't need much food. I eat now 25% of what I ate 10 years ago, right? And I don't drink much more. My daughters drink a lot. So they don't control the dosage, and they say it's all optimal dosage. It's based on contradiction, this science. Now, as I said, this is a reply to a 2-letter pages written by the undisclosed group, which couldn't even properly write their name, so I will explain if we have time. And they gave a single paper to their argument to show that they are updated. And this paper was Consequences of Community Water Fluoridation Cessation for Medication-Eligible Children and Adolescents in Janal, Alaska. Now, you see, it was based on study of what happens when you stop water fluoridation in a very atypical community in America, because you see, research only based on children, as all pro-fluoridation research is done only on children. So this is what I based my argument against. You see, I never quote fluoride skeptics. I always quote pro-fluoride and try to understand how they think. So in this paper, there is the expression dental fluorosis appears only 3 times at a single paragraph, in which it says about work done at the CDC. The panel in America, the panel also found that the only negative health effect associated with optimal fluorification, so community water fluoridation, even at higher than recommended level, I will explain it later, was severe dental fluorosis, and that's against what the Minister of Health assured the Parliament and the Supreme Court of Justice. So in their one single paper in which they quoted, so I went through this paper and I found out that it was based on a doctoral thesis, and it was signed by the researcher and 2 of her doctoral committee, done at the Department of Public Health at Minnesota. And there is a definition: fluorosis, dental fluorosis. Cannot be. I mean, dental fluorosis should be the sub-case of fluorosis. So they define fluorosis as dental, and they say dental fluorosis, dislocation of tooth enamel can occur during tooth development, blah, blah, blah. If consumption of fluoride is above optimal limits, classification can be run from very mild to severe. So you see, the whole conception is still focused about that we have an optimal limit based on 16th century science. Now in this, I read this thesis, and it has a passage about anti-fluoridation propaganda, which states, since the 1950s, community water fluoridation has come under attack by small groups of individuals like myself, who employ tactics designed to encourage distrust towards scientists and governments, who promote water fluoridation for improving oral health. So you see, that's 1984. They discredit from the early 50s fluoridation skeptics, making them as illogical people who don't understand science. Now this passage was based on a single source, Lear 2009, which wrote a book, is not a scientist, he wrote a book titled The Fluoride Wars, How a Modest Public Health Measure Became America's Longest Running Political Melodrama, in which he uses pseudoscience and junk science and fluorophobia to ridicule fluor skeptics, and which quote, none of the complaints of investigations resulted in any sound scientific peer-reviewed literature supporting or confirming a leak into any kind of data. In fact, expert group from the American Dental Association, CDC, and US Public Health Services concluded after reviews of research that fluoridation of community water system can reduce tooth decay in children, and then he's saying adults, but there is no science, for an average of 25%. Now, earlier claimed 60%, so they reduced it to 25%. Earlier dosage was 1 ppm and above. They reduced it to 0.7 against all science of fluoride and environmental risk and environmental science. So this one source is what the doctoral thesis was framing her mental conception when she did her Alaska study, which found that we have a reduction in cavities, which peaks at 7 years of age and go down until 12 and practically disappears until 18. And this study was based on study on Medicaid claims, I mean insurance claims by families from low economic background, from a very, these communities, mostly Native Americans and Eskimos, and very little whites, so poor people, poor community, lots of other health and social problems, and this was proof from 1918 that water fluoridation science is valid. I think we're entitled for a break now, right? Everybody is. Shouldn't we take a break now?
Well, if you finish, we can have questions, but that's...
On that period, so I finished on this part, and we can have questions.
Your questions, because we have a person joining in 20 minutes for the next talk.
So I finished this part. I take questions on fluoride, and then I move quickly to cannabis. Quickly.
But we don't have much time.
No, because I made my argument already about the validity of current science and expert science. And then I will only speak shortly about cannabis.
Okay, any questions or comments? Everyone's thinking about fluorosis.
Because if not, I will make a short argument about cannabis, and we can then have a short discussion and conclude the session.
Okay. It's interesting. I'm aware of the dilemma and the controversy, and they seem. I think what's really important when you're presenting the topic is just to stress that, number one, the source of the fluoride that we're getting in the water for the most part, for some bizarre reason has come from nuclear waste dumps, which is a mix of a whole
From the chemical industry, including fertilizers
yes,
industry.
yes. So there's a mix of chemicals. It hasn't been pure. There's a huge increase in autism and many of these childhood diseases that are happening right now. And we don't have any knowledge of why this is actually occurring. Environmental causes have been pointed to, as well as there are questions around vaccination and other things like that. And also that fluoride itself is a neurotoxin to every chemical in the body. And the poison, the most part, the poison affects small children. So I think these are really very clear arguments against fluoridation, that it has not been removed from so many places within our water system is a very clear political question. It's environmental, it's political, and it's kind of not really understood by the wider public, although there are strong lobbies against it. I think those points really need to be made clear and very overt. You can get an excellent video, YouTube video online if you just look up the controversy around water fluoridation. That's very clear, that gives a whole history of the dynamics and it makes people aware and awake.
Thank you very much for the question, because
It's not so
enabled for the statement, because it enabled me to focus on a single topic I wanted to add. Because, as I said, I never quote fluoroskeptics. I always quote pro-fluoridation. I try to understand how they think. So, in this article already quoted, how the fluoridation in Israel started, WHO assigned a technical expert to a consultant, as a consultant in Israel, to the Israel Ministry of Health in engineering aspect of fluoridation. Now this was a good person. He immigrated to Israel and nothing wrongdoing about it, but later, I have in Hebrew, I didn't translate it, that as I said, the WHO was involved directly, I have it I have a testimony in writing, in the legal proceedings in the Knesset to secure water fluoridation. Now, why do I say this? Because you said autism, and autism was linked by a controversial research, which I will not go into, between vaccinations and autism. Now, the WHO issued just recently, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, one of the most dangerous statements I think ever made since Nazi Germany science, because they portrayed as top 10 global threats to public health vaccine hesitancy. I want to quote from the WHO. Remember, I never quote skeptics. I only quote my adversaries. Vaccine hesitancy is a reluctance or refusal to vaccinate despite the availability of vaccines threatens to reverse progress made in tackling vaccine-preventable diseases like measles. And currently, I want to say something about vaccines. My daughters got all the recommended vaccines by the Ministry of Health. And I never thought about this issue too much until the Ministry of Health, the same department who promote the fraudulent water fluoridation science, began to target vaccine skeptics in Israel, blaming them for the outbreak of measles in Israel. Now, the Ministry of Health immediately said you should all take vaccines. Now, the vaccine all means children in the appropriate age. It's the MMR vaccine which was linked at that research to autism. I'm not saying anything about autism, but I say only one factor, that the vaccine contains aluminum as an adjuvant, which means something which stimulates the immune system. And aluminum is a known neurotoxin, same as fluoride, from the same family. So people who hesitate to inject aluminum, known neurotoxin, to their children are being portrayed by the WHO as a global threat to health, to public health. Now, just imagine, measles is only a not so dangerous epidemic, because supposedly one in, finish my sentence, 1 in 1,000 deaths, according to epidemiologists. In Israel, there were already counted 3,300 deaths, cases of measles, and they claim that one baby died, but I heard different stories. So either it is 1 in 3,300 cases, or there was no death case at all. Now that's about measles. Just imagine the next epidemics, which I don't know what's going to happen, when people really die, and then the WHO will portray vaccine hesitancy as a source of the outbreak. Now again, I want to explain what happened. The outbreak happened, and the Ministry of Health said we should all take the vaccine. Now the vaccine contains a weak virus. The weak virus causes a mild disease which could be infectious for 2 weeks according to the manufacturer of the vaccine, which by the way, since, I don't know, like 30 years, are immune in the USA from any loss of damages. So, the immune children, according to the manufacturer, spread the disease. So the longer the immune program continues, the more people are, according to the manufacturer, will get the measles, and they blame it, Ministry of Health in Israel and the WHO, on vaccines hesitancy. That's framing vaccine skeptics, as they framed before fluoride skeptics, as enemies of public health, like the Jews were in Germany in the 1930s. It's the same principle. We target a group, we explain why they are enemy to well-being of the community, and then we take measures. It started in Israel when they prevent children of vaccine skeptics to being admitted into a kindergarten, since they might spread the disease of measles. So I thank you very much for Your remark.
Are there any other comments or questions, please? Yes, please.
First of all, I have to object to, no, first of all, it was an eye-opener. I mean,
Thank you.
I admit that I followed you on the Wikipedia in Hebrew, and I read the decisions of the Supreme Court and the advisors, and I can assure everybody that the facts are correct. Second thing, I feel I have to object to the connection you've made between this last example and the German Nazis. I think this was overstated. Nothing can be compared to whatever the Nazis has done to the Jews. And third thing, relating to the vaccination. Just to be, I think, more accurate, and I've been attentive to this debate because I have grandchildren at the same age as your daughters, I think. And I'm aware of the debate, the public debate in Israel, which is very heated, you are correct again. But the problem is, and I assume you saw the last publication about the issue, that the focus of the outbursts in Israel, where the population is more, had more measles than in other places, are places where the population did not take vaccination, like Tzfat, for example, people who oppose to the vaccination for whatever reason, I won't go into it, and other places like Jerusalem. And in addition to that, there was a survey relating to the Orthodox Jews in Brooklyn, where the congregation are also opposed to vaccination, and they also now face an outburst of measles in Brooklyn. So I think that stating that those who are spreading the measles are those who had the vaccination and not those who refrained from vaccination is a little bending the truth, with all due respect.
Thank you very much for your remark. And first of all, I will agree with everything that you said.
Good.
I am not a vaccine skeptic. I will assume with the argument that some vaccines are important and valid. Okay? As I said, my daughters were vaccinated. Now, as I said, the manufacturer claimed that those who get the vaccine might spread the vaccine for 2 weeks. This is stated by the manufacturer. So I'm referring to the framing of a single group as the source of the outbreak. Now, the outbreak took place in populations, as you stated, which were under-vaccinated, but did not take place in other places with under-vaccinated population like Pakistan, in the Hadera area. So I'm saying that this is a complex situation, and the way the complex situation was framed was dangerous. Now, I thank you very much for your misgivings about what I said about the Holocaust, and I will explain my words. The Holocaust raised questions about how could good people be manipulated into wrongdoings. And as I said in the beginning of my talk, I'm a strong believer in human kindness. So I'm only afraid of hierarchies which might divert good people from, might divert the way good people think. Now, once the science is being portrayed in an inaccurate way, in ways which frame a group of people, portraying them, I quote the WHO, I don't control vaccine skeptics, portraying them as one of the 10 global threats to public health, it cannot be overstated. I don't want to compare past deeds because we are not now in the Third World War under a terrible regime which we cannot imagine. I am saying, look at the framing. It is based on inaccurate science, and it being represented by the public, by the health authorities, by those who represent science, in a terribly inaccurate and dangerous way. I hope I made my...
As long as you leave Nazis aside, it's
as I said, I take the Germans presently as a model for, as a better model for ecological
Activism.
not only activism, on the state level. Germany is more than 20 years ahead of Israel in terms of ecological policy. And as I said, they took million refugees, so I hold nothing against people. I can even say that I hold nothing against the very symbol of Nazism, which is a swastika. I will explain. I sit in Lotus, and if I close my hand, you can see the David Stamp. You see, this is an ancient yoga symbol. Now, if I reverse the legs, this is W posture, which orthopedians say we shouldn't allow our children to sit in because it's bad for our knees. And this statement is being said as a scientific claim by unflexible scientists. Now, in order to practice this posture, we have to do either this or that, which are the two opposites of the swastika in our body. So I hold nothing against anything, including the very symbol of Nazism. I try to understand, and what I understand is when people are framed as danger to the public based on fraudulent science. And Nazism was supposedly based on science. It was based on interpretation of the theory of evolution, but on a wrong interpretation. So now we have a wrong interpretation of the theory of vaccine. Just one must think about measles. There were already, when there was outbreak, 95% immune vaccine in the population. Now the theory was that if you have enough people vaccinated, you will not have outbreaks. This is the immunity of the community, of the herd, which is, I translate as thinking like a herd and not thinking for yourself. But I conclude. The meaning was that no matter how many people are vaccinated, you don't get the immunity of the herd. I have a different theory. According to my theory, if you eat well and you live in a healthy environment with no dangerous air pollution like we have in Bangkok, and no noise pollution, and no pollution in our water, you're going to have better immunity for all the population. If you don't have all this general and healthy environment, you'll get people who are more prone to diseases. And the outbreak of measles is just one example. Now, measles itself is scientifically shown to be a seasonal thing, outbreaking, whatever, no matter if you vaccine or not, every few years. So you cannot eliminate measles. So we know we managed to eliminate how do you say? Not smallpox? Polio is a good example. We managed to eliminate through vaccination programs some dangerous ailments. But we are not sure if that's the exception to the rule or that's the rule. And science hasn't proved that. That remains to be a theory. Thank you for your question.
But the function of being immunized is diminished, the spreading through the population, so you would diminish people dying. So it's impossible to have people with those all attributes, health, food. Sometimes they can even have water, and sometimes they can even have safe air in a kind of city polluted like this. So that's why government think about diminishing impact of spreading some disease. I believe that. That's why it's a kind of difficult discussion. The government need to choose if they are going to protect several or to attend some. I think you are right. Sometimes you should discuss the value of science, but looking all the things, you can see that government try to do their best to diminish impact from, for example, if you have some bacteria on your teeth, you can even die from heart attack. Exactly. Because they are going to go there and whatever. But that's I'm trying to understand better your arguments. But I think that government have their own arguments to trying to diminish the impact. Why they do that? Not only because of health and humankind and respect to life, also because of money. So otherwise they would have a lot of cost on treating this disease. Could I
thank you very much for your remark, and I want to clarify my point. All the people I'm studying here are good, willing, including all the dentists and all the people in charge of public health services. They are all well-meaning. So there is a more basic problem. The basic problem is the way that ethics and science are framed. Because, and I will make very short argument about it. we assume that there is morality. Yeah? Most people and current science is focused on anthropocentric morality. I think this is an inherently invalid morality because broader morality should be ecological, including, of course, non-human animals, and that's preclude much, that questions much of the science being done today in order to prove safety of hazardous substance by torturing non-human animals. But the thing is like this, we assume morality in general. Now we go into professional ethics, which is an area which is broader than morality because it includes also experts' knowledge. And so there we have ethics committees, which also have the general framework of morality, but also include the expert knowledge. And in every field you have like a feudal system in which you have experts, in which they and only they know the truth, and therefore they know what is good. Never mind if good is good for your teeth or good for any kind of thing. For example, transportation experts, but they don't know about environmental impacts. So, and our world is being designed by experts who know according to the best science what is good. You remember the Jewish tree of knowledge is learning to know good from the not good. We gave the power to experts to know their good in their field. Now, once they get used to, in their domain, to decide what is good, they are prone, like every other human, to influences. Now, we don't have to go far. 3 years ago, the Ministry of Health started a campaign against non-foods, which went off. They went off the campaign after 3 days only, because, quoting the CEO of the Ministry of Health to this day, we don't want to destroy the industry. Now the industry provides employment, and we are all invested in this industry through our pensions, and we measure our economic well-being through the GDP, so we're dependent on these industries, which the net effect is against the well-being and health of the Israeli population. So there is something wrong in the system. And then once the system is skewed, we have opportunities to manipulate it. Now, how we manipulate the system? I finished. We see television. It's not only commercials, it's the media. We see a person on television go into the fridge and take something out. This is a message. And these messages continue, and the Ministry of Health stopped its campaign after 3 days only. So we don't have to assume more influences than this, and you know that there are more. But I don't have to assume more, because once a system is already imbalanced, all kinds of imbalances could follow. Such imbalances, and I will make only a statement because I cannot make any longer, happened with cannabis, because it was outlawed in the 30s, not based on science. Every scientific committee which investigated the thing in the USA found it was harmless and of potential medicinal use. Yet, the President Nixon issued a war on drugs, which was a war on the on the peace movement against the war in Vietnam. They used psychedelics and cannabis, so he outlawed cannabis again and psychedelics, so he could persecute them through the government. There is no science against psychedelics or cannabis. Every science which investigates it proves it is of excellent value, could be dangerous if you don't use it properly, like we don't use properly presently in our society alcohol, caffeine, antidepressant, and all kinds of pharmaceuticals. So I mean, we have legal drugs which could be dangerous. We have illegal drugs, which some of them are natural and are considered by various traditions as even sacred. Cannabis is sacred in yoga. Now I don't understand why I, as a yoga teacher, should be subjected to the medicalization of cannabis, which is given force, unjustified scientifically, to the medical profession, who openly say they don't know anything about it because they never tried it for themselves. And they try to manipulate it into making it pharmaceutical, but it's herb, and they don't know anything about herbalistics because they never studied it. If you take a student, first-year student of medicine today, he will not study herbalistics. He will not study meditation. He will not take yoga courses or Tai Chi. He will learn that such practices are at best unscientific, although there are some recently proved on the epidemiological level which you get less back pains. So based on this science, they try now to make an unscientific policy. Now, I will explain myself and I will finish. When I'm finishing these documents, I'm going to write an expert opinion for two separate appeals to the Supreme Court of Justice, one by a pro-legalization party, and the other by an NGO representing medical cannabis patients. I'm not going to write it myself, there is a team. And it is based on violation of human rights based on two laws that are in Israel. The right of the patient law and the constitutional law, the honor and the liberty. I don't remember the exact translation.
Basic law, freedom and liberty.
Yes. Now, when this constitutional law was passed, it passed through Shmirat Dinim, which means that if we have this law, it doesn't revoke any previous law, including anti-drug laws. Which laws exist now in Israel? First, a law from the British era, which was signed as a martial law by the martial ruler of then Palestine, land of Israel. So it was never legislated by the people of Israel. And the second is the fact that Israel signed the UN treaty, the relevant UN treaty, which was also imposed on the Israeli citizens. Nobody asked the Israeli citizens. And so this constitutional law could not have been, so we could not have subjected these laws under this constitutional law. But now changes were made. New change in 2018, which they called it first criminalization with responsibility, which means, and after courts stop and the police stop chasing cannabis users, they said, okay, decriminalization, now we give fines, 3,000 shekel for first offense. You cannot argue, of course, in court against it, because immediately the fine goes up 6,000 shekel, which means above the monthly pay of more than 50% of the population. And next to that, we have the reform in medical cannabis, which gives excessive, unconstitutional power to doctors, and I will demonstrate only one document, and I will finish my argument. This is a letter by the Director General of the Ministry of Health from 2010. He is presently, by the way, running an important hospital in Tel Aviv. To the former in charge of the cannabis division in the Ministry of Health. The policy that I hereby determine to this topic is to limit the number of users, even at the expense of exclusion of other diagnoses, which among other things would harm some people who could get medically better. Specifically, I would like to limit inclusion of diagnoses of common diseases such as Parkinson's, including a disease that are difficult to diagnose accurately, e.g. fibromyalgia syndrome, diseases for which the response to cannabis is similar to other pharmaceutical drugs. I would like you to examine the process which took place in California on this issue, which led to excessive broad medical use. Sincerely. Now, the present policy of the Israeli government is, and I'm quoting, this is imbalance. I'm better at yoga than technical things. The present policy of the Israeli government, according to the person who is in charge of medical cannabis, is, quote, medicalization, not legalization. Now, as I said before, this is the first international conference I attend since 1914. In 1914, I gave a talk in Naples, a conference in bioethics, in which my topic was the medicalization of cannabis. In this talk attended few officials from the Ministry of Health in Israel, and then they started using the term medicalization not realizing its social implication, its use. They didn't even do Wikipedia to understand what the meaning of medicalization. So I suggest to you, I mean, you know what is medicalization. Whoever hears this lecture or the video, just use Wikipedia, see what is medicalization, and you will understand what I'm talking about. So, this was supposed to be part 2. I gave this talk in 2014. This book was published in 2018. So I'm the first to use the term the medicalization of cannabis. Now there is a book, and the Ministry of Health fails to understand the meaning of medicalization, and it is using the term medicalization. Allow me to say, that's the end of my talk, in the same way that economics speak about privatization. They don't understand the meaning of it on the commons, on the health commons, on the environmental commons, on the scientific commons, and in this sense, on the ability to use remedies from nature that everybody could have grown in his own house if he could have the time. I would have never do it myself. I only adopt plants. Couldn't take care of more than that. But it could be an uncentralized medicine and science versus hierarchy. And I showed you now the dangers of hierarchy, and I thank you very much for your patience and for inspiration in the past 3 days. And I will not miss, I haven't missed a single minute, and I will not miss a single minute more, even tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Excellent workshop and presentation on scientific analysis of science.
And bioethics.
And bioethics. Yes.
Valid science. Bioethics in the broader ecological framework, which include ethics and disciplinary science and holistic perspective and interdisciplinary outlook.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much.